This is the all-new Canyon Grizl. It's an adventurous carbon gravel bike that doesn't have a biplane on the front. Regular viewers will be familiar with the Canyon Grail with the double-decker handlebar, but this is a more rugged, more bike-packing, slightly closer to a mountain bike gravel design. The Grizl's closest relative in Canyon's range is obviously the Grail, but aesthetically it looks more like an endurance road bike that spent 6 months in the gym getting absolutely stacked. It is hench AF. Before we go on, a huge shout out to our kit sponsors Freewheel, who hooked me up with everything I am wearing right now. Check the description for links if you like what you see. Back to the bike, this specific model is the Grizl CF SL8 1x. This bike costs £2,949 in the UK or $2,849 US. I'm going to talk you through every detail of this build, what this bike is like to ride, but spoiler alert, the Grizl's a really good bike. It ticks so many boxes for me. I think it might very well for you as well. Keep watching to find out why. Let's talk about the Grizl's frame set. This is a carbon gravel bike. There is an aluminium version that's coming out later this year apparently, but for the time being, we're just talking about this one. Key selling point of this bike is that it has mounts for just about everything you should need for gravel bike packing type adventures. So what you get are 3 bottle cage mounts. You only get 2 on the more expensive SLX version because 2 of them underneath the down tube are given over to an internal Di2 battery mount. Don't worry about that. You also get a mount for a top tube bag, so 2 bosses there. Mounts on the fork for anything style cages, and you can put 3 kilos on each fork leg, and there are mounts for Canyon's own mudguards, which are very like the ones on the Grail. With so many bosses on this bike, you might say it's a bit like a holy grail. Think about it. The Grizl's frame set accepts both 1x and 2x drivetrains, and both are offered in the range, and you can even fit a dropper to this bike, and the US version of this specific model comes with an 80mm dropper. We don't get that option in the UK. Generous tyre clearances are a key selling point of the Grizl. The bike ships with 45mm tyres, and that's the maximum size if you're going to fit mudguards, but without fenders, you can go up to a 50mm tyre. Canyon is very emphatic that the bike is designed around one wheel size, but that means one wheel size for all the sizes except the 2 smallest sizes. So this bike is 700C, it's a medium, but the 2 smallest sizes, which are 2XS and XS, get 650B wheels. To create that tyre clearance, Canyon has dropped the drive side chainstay, which is a design we've seen quite a few bike makers do, and on the Grizl they've put a big metal protective plate, so that should mean the frame won't get damaged by chain suck if that ever happens. Another feature to highlight is the rather nifty hidden seat clamp, which is a design Canyon has used before. It's on the back of the bit where the seat stays meet, and that sits 110mm below the top of the seat tube, which means that there's more seat post able to flex back and forth for comfort. The Grizl has standard 12mm through axles front and rear. There's no weird boost spacing like Focus used on the recently launched Atlas gravel bike. And of course, the big thing that I keep coming back to is that this bike has essentially a standard cockpit setup. It does have a 1 1/4 inch steerer, so slightly bigger than the common 1 1/8 size. But in terms of how the cockpit fits together and how straightforward it is to fit accessories or swap stems over, it's a completely standard setup with a standard headset arrangement. I don't have a claimed weight for the CF SL version of the frame, but Canyon says that the SLX weighs 950 grams, including its small hardware, which is about 70 grams more than the Grail. You can safely assume that the CF SL Grizl will be a little bit more again. Incidentally, a key difference between SL and SLX versions is that only the SLX is specifically designed to be Di2 compatible. I mentioned the thing about the battery mount inside the frame earlier. In overall geometry, the Grizl is very, very similar to the Grail. The approach Canyon is taking here is quite a long reach, quite a short stem and quite wide handlebars, and that's to give you confidence-inspiring handling off-road, but it's not so extreme that it's compromised for riding on the road, because when people ride gravel bikes, they're generally doing a mixture of different types of terrain. This medium bike has 402mm of reach and an 80mm stem. The bars are 440mm wide. The stack is 579mm, which is pretty similar to an endurance road bike or something. So none of those numbers are particularly unusual. Put this side by side with one of Canyon's road bikes like the GRX, and the most noticeable difference is that the whole bike is just longer. So an GRX, for example, will have a shorter top tube and a longer stem. And the actual wheelbase difference is of the order of about 40mm between road and gravel. Like all the recent Canyons that have launched, the Grizl has a unisex frame set, so the geometry doesn't change. At launch, there is one women-specific model in the range though, which has different finishing kit on it. Let me talk you through this build, which, just to remind you, is the Grizl CF SL8 1x. This gets you Shimano GRX RX 810 components, which are Ultegra equivalent gravel specific components. If you want to know more about GRX, make sure you check out our very detailed video on the subject. But what you need to know now is that it's a full set of the components, and as this is a 1x setup on this bike, you're getting a 40-tooth chainring at the front and an 11-42 cassette at the back. The brakes are, as ever, Shimano's excellent proven GRX Ultegra equivalent ones. The wheels on this bike are DT Swiss aluminium clinchers. They are the G1800 Spline DB25, and the key spec detail you need to know about those is that they have 24mm internal rim width, which is very well suited to the quite wide gravel tyres on this bike. The tyres are Schwalbe G1 Bites, which are the same tyres that the Grail gets, but these are in a larger 45mm width. The Grail gets 40mm tyres as standard. I keep banging on about it and will continue to do so, but this bike has a normal aluminium cockpit, standard drop bars with a minimal amount of flare, regular aluminium stem, nothing too unusual. The seat post is very notable. This is the S15 VCLS 2.0, which is the two-part leaf spring seat post that offers loads and loads of compliance. I'll talk about that more in the riding section. Here it is topped with a Physique Terra Argo saddle, which you may recall from a recent Tech of the Month feature, card up here. It's gravel specific, and that means that the cutout is filled in, but there's a little drain so that water can flow away if you get a wet bottom. This complete bike without pedals weighs 9.2 kilograms. Remember, that's for a medium. There's a full set of kind of minimalist bike packing luggage, so not full-scale multi-day camping stuff, but Canyon has collaborated with bag maker Apidura to give you the option of a frame bag, a top tube bag and a seat bag. These are available as extras for the bike. Canyon also provides frame protection stickers. Now, I have found that the stickers don't exactly match the location of the straps on the bags. That's something that I need to clarify with Canyon, but there is quite a range of stickers offered, so hopefully you should be able to find what you need to protect your frame. There may come a time when gravel bike reviews do not entail an in-depth philosophical discussion about the nature of gravel riding. What is it? What's it all about? Why do we do it? What is the perfect gravel bike? But today is not that day. Canyon says there's no such thing as the perfect gravel bike, and I agree with them completely. because gravel is such a wide spectrum of types of riding, and gravel bikes cover everything from what are essentially road bikes to things that are virtually mountain bikes, except they might have drop bars rather than flat ones. Canyon says that the Grizl is aimed at the kind of rough gravel end of the spectrum, or what, you know, I might call mountain bike adjacent, because I'm still trying to make that happen as a term. By contrast, the Grail is for rides that are more 50-50 road and a bit of off-road, whether that's forestry trail or other relatively smooth types of gravel. Canyon calls it light gravel. The first thing you notice jumping on the Grizl is just how flexible that seat post is. The VCLS two-part design adds loads and loads of flex, and it's to the point where I found that I needed to adjust both for sag and for the angle of the saddle, because as you put your weight down on it, the nose of the saddle tends to tip up very slightly. This is a really good reminder, I think, that no matter what clever frame technology you've got, a good flexible seat post is still one of the most effective ways to add comfort to a bike, and having ridden the Grizl a fair bit now, it really does help quite a lot. I really like the Grizl. It's loads of fun on kind of mixed forestry type terrain, and yet it doesn't feel overly compromised on the road, despite the kind of burlier approach to gravel cycling that it's taking. The geometry worked really well on the Grail, and it works just as well on the Grizl. It is genuinely quite a confidence-inspiring bike, and I found that on kind of the very lightest end of mountain bike type terrain, it's loads of fun. And Canyon talked a bit about how they discovered the joy of being under-biked, and I'm kind of with them on that, as long as you don't attempt anything that's too gnarly. What I found was that if you went onto any terrain that was more kind of steep and mountain bikey, it all fell apart completely, because fundamentally you're still riding a bike with relatively narrow bars compared to a mountain bike. You've still got a fixed saddle, unless you're one of the lucky ones with a dropper post. But then I don't think dropper posts really belong on gravel bikes, because at that point maybe you'd just be better off on a mountain bike. Interestingly, I found that the slightly wider tyres compared to a bike like the Grail made a surprisingly large difference. Now, this is probably partly psychological, because you're looking down at your front wheel thinking, what is the limit of grip here? But there's no question that the extra 5mm of rubber does make a bit of a difference. You've simply got more rubber on the trail, and when you are riding slightly rougher stuff, when you're getting spat offline by hitting a rock or something, it's just that little bit better. On the subject of tyres, I remain a real fan of the Schwalbe G1 bike, which I think is a great all-round tyre for typical kind of UK gravel riding conditions. I always say this, no one tyre can do it all, but in terms of being able to work on the road without feeling hideously slow, but still offer a useful amount of grip off-road, I think this is about as good as it gets. Obviously, if you're going to go into like really deep mud, for example, you need something with a more aggressive tread, but these are a lot better than some of the so-called gravel tyres that are maybe better suited to more American style riding. It almost goes without saying, but you should run a bike like this tubeless to get the most out of it, and make sure your pressures are actually low enough. I've got these at sub 30 psi, I'm around 27-28 psi, and that's at my weight where I need to be. It's really worth plugging your numbers into a tyre pressure calculator, because with a tubeless setup, riding off-road, the best pressure is probably lower than you think, and in the real world it's not actually going to be slower because you're not losing grip or traction all the time. Gearing is always a key detail with gravel bikes. I've talked before about how great GRX is. My opinion on that has not changed at all. I do maintain that perhaps a 2x setup maybe works better if you are aiming to do more of that versatile style of riding. And if you are thinking more about the kind of bikepacking end of things, the low gear on this 1x setup, which is a 40 and a 42, isn't super duper low. It's fine for general riding, but I would definitely consider the 2x options if you're thinking about doing a more varied type of riding. I think Canyon has really nailed the geometry thing. The whole long reach, short stem, wider bar thing. It worked really well on the Grail, both the carbon and aluminium versions. It works really well on this bike. And I do now find myself wondering kind of what is the limit of where you can take that, because we saw in mountain bikes that people kept making them longer and longer and longer and slacker. As it is, this is a very versatile geometry because it doesn't feel compromised and boat-like when you're on the road, but it is that bit less intimidating if you're riding technical terrain off-road. Could it be that we could go even longer with even shorter stems? I don't know, but what I will say is that the Grizl is just a great bike to ride. Luckily, on the gearing front, Canyon is offering plenty of choices for riders, and in that vein, I'm going to talk you through the entire Grizl range. As ever, I'm going to need to refer to my notes for this because there are a lot of numbers. Right, the cheapest model in the Grizl range is the Grizl CF SLX, which comes with 10-speed Shimano GRX RX400, which is the cheapest set of GRX components. That bike costs £2,199 or $2,099. Next up is the Grizl CF SL7, which also comes in a women's specific variant that gets a GRX RX600/RX810 mix, and it's £2,499 or $2,399. Then you've got the Grizl CF SL8, which comes with GRX RX810 in a 2x configuration. That's £2,999 or $2,949. Or if you prefer, the 1x version of the same model, which is this bike here, costs £2,949 or $2,849. So those are all the Grizl CF SL models. You've then got the top of the range SLX models. So the Grizl CF SLX 8 Di2 comes with Shimano GRX Di2 components in a 2x configuration, and it costs £4,999 or $4,799. The CF SLX 8 1x gets the 13-speed Campagnolo Ekar 1x group set, and it costs £4,899 or $4,699. If you haven't already picked up on this, I really like the Canyon Grizl. For me, it takes all of the best bits of the Grail and leaves out the weird bits, which, let's be honest, mostly relate to that handlebar, but then also you're getting the added versatility of extra tyre clearances. It might be that this slightly burlier frame set with a standard cockpit offers very slightly less comfort at the front end. I don't know because I haven't done a back-to-back test with the Grail, but with bigger tyres adding the option to give you more comfort, I don't really see a downside to the Grizl. The bike is barely any heavier than the Grail, and it doesn't come with any of the compromises that cockpit on the Grail entails, so you don't have any of the difficulty mounting accessories, and equally fit adjustments are much more straightforward because changing a stem, for example, is no problem at all on this bike, whereas on the Grail that's a complete swapping over of the cockpit because it's a one-piece design. Because of all that, and Canyon won't thank me for saying this, I can't help wondering if they've inadvertently killed off the Grail by launching the Grizl. This bike offers so much versatility, it looks great, comes in some really nice paint jobs, and it just works as a package, and there's no ifs and buts. I don't have to caveat this and say, yes, but, you know, only if you can put up with this or live with that. Really, this is just a gravel bike that should work for pretty much any rider. Get the fit right, get your setup right, pump your tyres up correctly, and you're going to have an absolute blast on this bike in the woods. Based on my experience with the cheaper Grails, I think that the entry-level model will be an absolutely brilliant bike. It's significantly more affordable than this one. It's got excellent 10-speed GRX components. My only caveat to that would be that you're not getting the very cool seat post and you're not getting the slightly wider rims. The seat post is maybe going to be the more noticeable of those two things when you're riding, but it's still going to be a fantastic all-rounder bike, and it is really relatively good value. I know that prices are not as appealing as they were, say, a year ago for bikes like this, but that is just how the bike industry is right now. It's not something we can change. I'm also excited to see what Canyon does with the aluminium version of the Grizl later this year, although the Grail is already an option and the aluminium Grail has standard bars anyway, so that's a great choice that's already available if a bike like that is more appealing to you. And of course, the aluminium model is substantially cheaper. I would love to know what you think about the Grizl. Please do let us know your thoughts in the comments. There was a huge reaction when the Grail came out because it was so outlandish looking. The Grizl is certainly a more conventional bike overall, but I think it's a package that's going to appeal to a lot of you. The Grizl does a lot of things really well. I really like this bike, and I think there's a good chance that you will too. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you're still with me at this point, you're clearly a BikeRadar superfan, so 1,000 BikeRadar gold stars to you. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that little bell icon so you get notified every single time we upload a new video.